You are watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next maybe half an hour, we are going to be rounding up the Doctor Who news so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I'm John.
And I'm Mark.
So, the Blue Box podcast started off as a Doctor Who podcast, and when we started Strangers in Space, we were going to try and balance the time, sort of roughly 50-50 between Doctor Who and films and other things. And recently, I think we've kind of neglected the Doctor Who a bit. So I've said, let's try and do slightly more regular Doctor Who, because I appreciate the fact that most of our listeners are probably here for the Doctor Who rather than for the films. So I'm going to try and get a Doctor Who episode out weekly if possible, or as near as damn it if not. And as part of that, I figured we should up the ante slightly on the reviews that we've been doing. There were sort of one-off story reviews, because those have been kind of intermittent. We should try and make it more regular. Should try and get Matt to host his discussions on a monthly basis. I'm going to try and host a discussion on a monthly basis. And the sort of fourth thing, so that we can keep it in a sort of four weekly rotation, is I think once a month, maybe at the end of the month, we should have a news roundup, which is basically an excuse to start a conversation about whatever it is that's going on. So if it's a really light news month, we might talk for half an hour about Big Finish or something, because that's what there is to talk about. I don't know. This is the first one. So as a pilot episode, I guess what we'll do is round up the news so far about Series 14. By which I don't intend for us to sort of forensically go through everything that's come out. And I don't really want to go too spoilery for people who don't know. So we'll stick to mostly official news, or if it's unofficial news, it'll be stuff that's been very widely shared, such as the space slug, for example. We might talk about that a little bit, but I don't think that's been officially shared, but it's been pretty widely shared. So I think we can probably go there, as it's not incredibly spoilery. So we'll probably just, for now, stick to basically casting news from Series 14, I suppose, because we have talked about all the stuff casting-wise for the specials when we've talked about those, but we didn't carry on and talk about Series 14. So I'm just going to throw, I'm not going to go through everybody, but the bigger names, the ones that we'll know, the ones that will mean something more to our listeners, I'll throw the names out there, and we'll get a few sort of responses from you two, about how you feel about it. But okay, randomly then, Mark Donaldson, what do you think of the idea of Anita Dobson being in Doctor Who as Mrs. Flood? She's called Mrs. Flood. Surely that sounds like something out of a Paul Mars audio play, doesn't it?
I would not be surprised if, yes, she's playing some kind of scatty old lady with a sinister secret.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah.
That's the Christmas one, is that right? Is that what they were kind of thinking it would be, or Ruby's first episode, or something like that?
Semi-regular or something like that.
Oh, is she? She's probably Ruby's landlady or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It'll be something.
Yeah, I've not been keeping up, and I don't want to keep up too much, because I'd like there still to be surprises when we get there. So I've got a list of names in front of me, and I remember the announcements of these names, but I don't know much more than that. So, but yeah, Anita Dobson, that's kind of rounding off a circle that began back in Resurrection of the Daleks, isn't it? But it goes slightly to Russell T Davies's Soaps background, John.
Yeah, totally. It's a huge name from the Soaps past. I think wasn't that Christmas Day episode the biggest single drama in UK history or in TV history, I think?
Oh, the EastEnders one.
Yeah, I think it was. Like it's ratings tricks to achieve it in a way, but yeah, it's. I suppose people have kind of my age don't know how much Mark knows about Dobson EastEnders, how much he's seen.
Oh, I bloody love EastEnders. I actually, although not so much, I'm missing it right now. And Cindy Beale's apparently coming back tonight, and I'm sitting here chatting to you guys. So yes, no, I obviously.
I once sat and had dinner with Cindy Beale, and there's photographic evidence to prove it.
Nice. But yeah, so obviously I know the backstory. Obviously, I wasn't watching it when it went out, but everybody knows Den and Angie, and the divorce papers and all that kind of thing. It is part of the kind of cultural history of the UK, I think, really.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, here's another name. Well, this one's one for John, maybe. Anirin Barnard.
Really? Is it for me?
Oh, do you not? Well, he's a 36, 37-year-old actor, Welsh, I believe, which is why I thought maybe it would be one that you'd recognise. Okay, he's playing it.
Just from down the road.
I know, but he's not.
Lovely.
He's a relatively well-known name. He's like not a nobody by any stretch of the imagination. And if you looked him up, you would definitely, without question, recognise the face, I think. But he's playing. Okay, so he is playing a potential politician. I think one of the episodes take place during an election, right? And he's the potential electee, I believe.
Yeah, Russell T Davies, going back to electoral politics, he doesn't have the greatest grasp on the political system, maybe, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out.
Well, we'll see. It might be an episode that he didn't write, because there are a couple, aren't there? I don't know how many, maybe 3 of the 8 he didn't write, or maybe 2. Oh, speaking of which, I mean, it's strongly rumoured, and I don't think it's confirmed, but I think it's as near as damn it, because I think the rumours have got such weight behind them that I don't think there's anybody who doesn't think it's true. But Stephen Moffat appears to be back to have done an episode.
I've heard that rumour, yes.
Yeah.
And no bad thing, because he did, was it the thing he did with Russell during lockdown? Indeed, with them, he said he still has Doctor Who ideas. So I would not be surprised at all.
For sure. And if you're going to get somebody to, well, I mean, Russell T Davies is going to bang on that door first if he's looking for guest writers, isn't he? So I guess it's just a case of whether he can persuade him, but it sounds like he has. Okay, the 3 new pieces of casting news that have come out in the last few weeks, one of which is Indira Varma, and she's playing a villainous character called the Duchess. There's Mrs. Flood, the Duchess. There's kind of a thing going on here to a certain extent. There's kind of Russell T Davies is very much leaning into the idea of Doctor Who as this sort of cartoon strip sort of thing, I think, with this more than he did the first time. I'm going to come back to that idea, but Indira Varma is a pretty big actress now. She was in Torchwood, of course. I can't remember whether Torchwood came just before Rome or just after, but Rome was kind of a launch pad for her in America. Do we remember?
Before, I think, but I wouldn't swear to it.
Yeah, no, I can't quite remember. You've got a new piece of casting also is Lenny Rush as Morris. Lenny Rush, 14 years old, who's playing kind of, I don't know, it looks like a fairly main character for an episode at least. And then, of course, the big one that we've had announced last week, which had been strongly rumoured for a while anyway, and kind of was preempted somewhat by her appearance in Chris Chibnall's last episode. So obviously Bonnie Langford's back as Mel. So, Mark, what do you make of that?
What, Bonnie, or just the whole general?
Well, just the whole general thing, because we'll go on to a conversation about unit and potential spin-offs and whatnot. If you like, we'll go straight into that now if you want.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think Lenny Rush is great. He was really good in that Daisy May Cooper thing, which name has suddenly escaped me.
Am I being unreasonable?
That's the one. Yes, he was very good in that. So I'd be interested to see what kind of character he's playing in Doctor Who. I hope it's not a kind of
Sontaran stratagem.
I know that's what I was kind of thinking, and I hope that's not necessarily going to be the case. But yes, probably a child genius with a sinister secret. But in terms of Bonnie Langford, I think it's great. I think, as somebody pointed out on the Time Lash when we talked about it last week, she never had a character in the 80s, so might as well give her a character now in the 2020s. And I think absolutely, I think Bonnie Langford is a really good actor. She was fantastic when she was in EastEnders, and also she is a name. And I think that's what a lot of Doctor Who fans forget when they sort of think about the 80s and all that kind of thing, is that Bonnie Langford's a pretty big name for anybody that's into musical theatre, anybody that's kind of into, and now you've got, she's been on Dancing on Ice, she's been on The Masked Singer, she's been on EastEnders.
Is there a case to be made that she's the sort of new version of RTD's John Barrowman?
The sort of safe the safe version of John Barrowman, yes, possibly.
But also might be heading up, or at least fairly high in the cast, of a spin-off potentially as well. So
yeah, but then also the other thing is that it feeds into an idea that Russell T Davies has gone, nah. They've been doing Doctor Who wrong for the past sort of 10 years, making it a kind of prestige television drama. Doctor Who is camp as Christmas, so I'm going to get in Bonnie Langford, Neil Patrick Harris, Jinx Monsoon, Jonathan Groff, and we're going to go full Broadway, and that's kind of Doctor Who in the 2020s.
See, well, I'm half wondering if there is a musical episode in the works here, because it's
the thing is,
on.
Well, yeah. You say that, but all the people that you'd expect to be in the musical episode are all in distinct episodes from one another. So it doesn't quite work as a theory, does it?
Unless it's an Avengers style, they all come together in the season finale.
Or alternatively, there could be a song in each episode.
It's a show-stopping finale, literally.
I did want to come to
Jazz
this.
hands.
I did want to come to this, and I think we're kind of there, so I'm going to do it now. Back when the first iteration of RTD sprang up, the sort of 3 Keith Boak episodes that basically began the production and more or less began the series, I loved those. Those were kind of cartoony. They're kind of like a comic strip brought to life. Camp, yeah, but I think camp in a comic strip kind of a way. And all that stuff with, I don't know, for example, Mickey and their pizza, that kind of stuff. It's all very much out of a comic strip with the sort of black eyebrows and the greased hair and stuff. I liked that, and I thought there was a good balance there. So I know Keith Boak tends to be a figure of, criticism amongst most Doctor Who fans. I thought he was a terrific director. I've seen other stuff he's done like Nylon, and I think he's a great director, actually. And I think he got the short end of the stick on Doctor Who by being brought in first. And I think actually his work on those 3 episodes was mostly pretty good in terms of he managed to hit a tone that I think was there in Russell T Davies's writing that I think then became unbalanced when Joe Ahern came in and tried to make a more serious version of Doctor Who, still with the same writing. And I thought that became an uncomfortable tone for the series to hit, but that became the template for the next 3 series of Doctor Who afterwards. And I thought that it was a real sad moment when the sort of tone from those first sort of 4 or 5 episodes was lost.
I think that comes back though at the end. I think that's definitely there in Bad Wolf.
No, it's not. It's Joe Ahern. It's there in the writing. It's there in the writing.
It's definitely there in Boomtown. I would say kind of comedy.
But it's in the writing rather than so much in the characters, in the direction of the characters. So there's a bit of comedy there, but it's less comic book comedy than sitcom comedy. And Joe Ahern is directing it for regular television instead of putting a comic book up on screen, which is what was going on back in the first 5 episodes, because I think Eros Lynn picked up what Keith Boak was doing in The End of the World and in The Unquiet Dead. And I think that's lost. So I don't think there's a massive change, but I think there's definitely a dividing line between the first 5 episodes and the 8 that come afterwards and the series. The point I'm bringing this up and the reason why I'm saying all this is, so it looks to me like, not necessarily with the Tennant specials, because it feels like there's a big paradigm shift between the tone of the Tennant specials and the tone of Ncuti Gatwa, but everything that we've seen about Ncuti Gatwa looks a bit like Russell T Davies has looked back at the tone of those first 5 episodes, and instead of moving more towards regular television, soap opera, whatever, instead he's moved just as far, if not further, but in completely the other direction.
Well, you say that, and literally that first special is comic strip.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. But what I mean is, yes, literally that first one is comic strip, but it's also Tennant and Tate. And so presumably it will lean into the tone of the Tennant and Tate episodes from series 4. Whereas it looks like the Ncuti Gatwa stuff afterwards goes not just into comic strip, but into high camp. So so what I'm saying is, if you take comic strip, you can lean in one direction and go soap opera, or you can lean in the other direction and go high camp. And it looks, from the casting and from what we've seen of the costumes and other things like the sets and so forth, whatever we've seen, that Russell T Davies with series 14 would be going in the other direction, way more into high camp. And I think, but what my point was going to be, for me, I don't know, it's a question of balance, and I'm not sure whether what we're seeing looks like there's going to be an awful lot of balance. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing about that kind of comic strip tone you talk about on the first few episodes is that it maybe doesn't. They have Christopher Eccleston there, and if you want a comic strip version of Doctor Who, you don't cast Christopher Eccleston. Whereas I think you can imagine it with David Tennant, particularly if he's going back to season 4, and Ncuti Gatwa, if you've seen anything he's been in, frankly, with the Barbie movie that's coming out, Sex Education, etc. So he will play into that a lot more than Eccleston would have. Have they announced any directors yet for the series?
Yeah, there are a few that we know about. But
Mark
mostly, I guess,
Torn's back,
yeah.
I think, isn't he?
Yeah.
Chibnall era, which is an interesting.
Just to go back to the point John was making, I think that's it, though. If you put somebody like Christopher Eccleston in a camp version of Doctor Who, you achieve a balance. If you put somebody like Ncuti Gatwa into a camp version of Doctor Who, then you kind of... So it's a bit like just eating desserts, right? If there's no balance in your diet, you're going to get sick of the diet. And I just wonder if, from what we've seen of series 14 so far, if there's going to be enough balance in the diet.
The thing is, though, I would disagree on this. For me, watching it at the time and going back to it, I still think Eccleston's a great Doctor, but I do think those first few episodes, for me, I remember watching it at the time and struggling a bit with Eccleston against the rest of it. It was like, oh, this guy doesn't feel comfortable, and he didn't feel comfortable. He's on record as saying that he didn't feel comfortable with the character as written, with the tone. He didn't quite know how to do it, and that's why when Joe Ahern comes in, he's a lot happier. He's a lot happier with Stephen Moffat's script. He starts to kind of get Christopher Eccleston's Doctor Who rather than Russell T Davies's Doctor Who.
See, just on that point, before you move on, I like the Eccleston who's uncomfortable because I think it fits what he's doing with the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and in retrospect, yes, I did come to kind of go, by the time the series was over, and you're like, well, he's a war, he's scarred by the war.
Yeah.
He's thrown into kind of campy Doctor Who adventures, but he's not quite there yet. So I get it.
Yeah.
But also, knowing that the actor himself is uncomfortable makes it slightly harder to watch in retrospect as well. So I think I do think you're right to be concerned, but I think actually my main issue with Doctor Who, and I say this as somebody who's enjoyed it over the past few years, but my main issue with Doctor Who, I think since Capaldi definitely, has been that I think nobody's really known what they want to do with it. They want to kind of try and make it like a kind of adult prestige sci-fi show, but they can't quite crack that audience. And then, people accuse them of sort of ignoring the kids, and then they try to make it too sort of campy and family friendly with something like the Saranga Conundrum, and everybody throws their toys out of the pram. I think if anybody can do high camp Doctor Who with a mass appeal, it is Russell T Davies, and it probably is Ncuti Gatwa, as the Doctor as well.
I'm going to be fascinated to see what Russell's approach is, because the first time Doctor Who, he wanted everyone to watch, and is that even possible in the modern TV?
That is interesting, and I think a lot of his choices do speak to a kind of, he's looked at the landscape of sort of pop culture at the moment, and it's all callbacks and fan service but when that's done well, I think it's still broadly entertaining for a general audience. I think you go along with something and you go, all right, cool, well, there's loads of backstory, but I can catch up with that if I like it. But in this moment right now, I'm enjoying something. I think as long as it's always just background color rather than driving the story, and I do think that's what Russell T Davies is going for this time round, rather than before.
Yeah, I think he does give these things emotional resonance, though. Particularly from something like School Reunion. I think that's where he scores. Where sometimes the multiverse stuff doesn't quite work. If you see characters, who are they? Whereas Russell, he will tell you what this means.
Yeah.
And I think where he centers it is on sort of late teenagers, maybe early 20s. And he did that first time around. That first series is Rose falling in love with the Doctor, and then sort of, back and forth over whether actually she's interested in Adam as well or instead, or Mickey as well or instead, or Jack as well or instead. But it's about
it's
somebody
interesting
in their
that
late
Billy
teens.
Piper's Taste of Men is terrible in a fictional sense as well as in a real life sense as well. But
I don't know about Chris Evans. I mean, I'm not a fan of Chris Evans, but I can see why she was.
Sure.
But that first series, and then of course the second series and the third series which came out of that, was very much centered around a love story, and it was very much a teen love story as well. It wasn't a love story between two grown adults. It was about a teenager with a crush on an older man and whether that would be reciprocated. And so the sort of alternatives that she gets along the way are basically Mickey, someone of her own age, Adam, someone of her own age, Jack, somebody of the Doctor's age, ostensibly. And it's about the tensions between, and that carries on. And this, although you don't look at Millie Gibson and Ncuti Gatwa and you don't think there's going to be any kind of love story there. And so it doesn't look like he's leaning into that, but presumably that's more going to be like the Tennant and Tate relationship, which clearly worked really well. So he's probably hoping to repeat that, but with somebody who looks like Rose and basically has a name that's almost exactly the same as Rose too. So he's doing that. It's like a greatest hits kind of thing is going on, but everything else that's around them, because I mean, he is very much leaning into non-normative casting, right? So everything else that's going on around them leans very much into the sort of preoccupations of people in their teens and early 20s, and people as opposed to the sort of kickback against that stuff which comes from people our own age. So he's definitely making a version of Doctor Who that's for people between the ages of say 14 and 24, which spreads outwards from that base, I think. And I think that's basically what he did the first time, and he's just doing the same thing from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in seeing how Millie Gibson's played, because obviously she's the audience viewpoint character in all this. So naturally, we are going to be seeing it through a teen, 20-year-old eyes again. But can Russell write that character? I don't know.
He did.
He should, but
I also think though that let's not forget. I mean, obviously the first series, season 14, I should say, will be the first series for, I'm sure, a generation of viewers. But also there is the fact that we've got the 60th, and we likely have Ncuti Gatwa appearing for maybe a little bit more than you would normally expect from a regeneration episode. So and then we've also got a Christmas special, which I think is just him. It's been a bit kind of. Yeah. It's not. I'm not sure exactly how that's all kind of playing out, but that was kind of what was suggested. So by the time it's going to be weird, it's going to be that kind of Martha thing where I think he's going to play with perspective, where like he knows that the audience knows who the Doctor is, but then also he's aware of a new audience maybe jumping on with Millie Gibson. The thing I'm most interested in is Ncuti Gatwa as the first gay actor to play the Doctor.
He's not confirmed, is he? I know he codes that way, but
sure. Okay, fine. I'll take that back. But that's I'm interested to see how that plays out in Doctor Who, and because Russell T Davies has been quite upfront about his own changing kind of views on sort of who should play certain sexualities, certain preferences and things like that. So I'll be interested to see if that is reflected in the Doctor as well. And because we kind of had a soft attempt at it with Jodie Whittaker, but it never quite paid off.
Well, and of course, Russell T Davies, first time around, I remember in my personal life, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, but Stephen Moffat's made it so sexual," and I was thinking, "Hang on, you had Russell T Davies, who had lesbian cat nuns, jokes about blowjobs, and all sorts of this, that, and the other." Russell T Davies was way more sexual, really, than Stephen Moffat ever was. And so, I can't
Russell's
imagine.
On record as saying that's how he gets into his characters, isn't it? Sex is a big thing. With how
so you can't imagine that sort of 18 years on, 19 years on, it's not going to be even more so.
No.
Or at least as much. So Whether that includes the Doctor, you've got to think it must, because one thing Russell T Davies did first time around, and he did it very nervously actually, so there's always some weird science fiction excuse, but in every one of those first 4 series he had the Doctor kiss the companion, you know?
Yes.
Yep.
So it's not like he doesn't have some kind of previous on at least investigating that territory.
But that was always the sort of JNT in him as well, because he knew that that's the clip that you get on daytime telly, that's the clip you get in the tabloids, that's the clip you get in the trailer. So yeah, he's absolutely going to be aware of things like that with this series as well.
So we'll see how that plays out a bit closer to the time. Look, we weren't planning on going on for ages here. We'll probably come back to this very conversation next time or the time after, and there'll be a different sort of lineup of people, I guess, over the course of these news roundups, but a sort of 20 or 30-minute news roundup once a month. Is there anything more that either of you wants to bring up about the sort of things that we've been talking about here, or are we good for now?
I don't know. We know enough to say much more, do we?
Yeah.
To be honest, not really, no. I was thinking more, I tell you one thing we've not talked about. So let's give 5 minutes to this before we go. It looks like the spin-off and the sort of behind the scenes news I had about it when we talked about it on the podcast before. Actually, if you sort of map that over this, then it is definitely about the same thing. But it looks like the spin-off is going to be a unit spin-off. Is that announced officially? I'm not sure it is, but
No, not yet.
Not yet.
That is very much what people are talking about, which will be something like 8 episodes where unit comes up against Weeping Angels in one, Daleks in another, Cybermen in another, etc., etc. Ruth Madeley's also not been announced, I don't think, for Doctor Who.
Yeah, she's in the
She's in the trailer for the 60th.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, but she's not been mentioned in connection with series 14 yet.
No, I don't think so. But I think it's
the inference was that she was going to go on and be more than a character just in the specials, and so I wonder if Madeley is going to be a lead in the unit spin-off. Gemma Redgrave presumably there with her. Bonnie Langford, given that 40 years on from being a computer programmer who travelled with the Doctor, and given the scene at the end of The Power of the Doctor where you've got Kate Lethbridge-Stewart telling the companions to hang around because she might have jobs for one or more of them, it makes sense to me that the unit spin-off is spearheaded by Redgrave, Madeley and Langford. I don't know, does that sound plausible?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what it's going to be, really.
And so that would
be 3
be
good leads.
Oh yes. But also interestingly, and for Russell T Davies, who has a kind of he famously has a kind of mother fixation, doesn't he? He's essentially setting up unit to be run by 3 mothers or mother type characters, right? Because at this stage in their careers, I mean, Ruth Madeley's clearly the youngest of the 3, but again, she's not entirely that young, and the other 2 are definitely older characters. So it kind of sets unit up to be very different from the unit that we knew, but probably more importantly,
it kind of ties in with that kind of Vogue, the Happy Valley kind of thing, with where you've got actresses in middle age or late middle age who are leading series now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so Russell T Davies has seen things like Happy Valley and says,
Scott
right,
Bailey, etc.
Yeah, and says, right, let's have that in Doctor Who. How do you do that? All female unit, or all female top heavy unit, I should say. And so that makes complete sense, because it takes the unit we knew in the 70s. It takes, I guess, a little bit from Torchwood and says, right, Torchwood worked, but maybe there's a different way of doing that sort of thing. And it's already set up in unit.
It'll be a less horny Torchwood, I reckon.
Oh, for sure. Do you know what I mean?
That's what
more
we're
mainstream.
Get.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Angle out
friendly.
all the stuff in Torchwood that wasn't Disney friendly, and instead reconfigure the sort of monster of the week thing for a team that's led by these 3 women, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll be interested to see if they've got a female showrunner for it as well. That might be an interesting skew.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I can't see that from
I was going to say, yeah, I know I was going to say something like that, but then I was like, oh no, I don't want to be too, you know, that age-old thing of like everybody loves Russell T Davis, but then actually when you look at how many female writers were in the Russell T Davis era compared to the Moffat era and the Chibnall era, it's a very different story. But anyway.
Plus him marrying all these black characters off with each other after they've all had unrequited lusts after white characters. There's a certain degree to which Russell T Davis is a little bit kind of, what's the expression when you can't see something that's right in front of your face?
I don't know, but a friend of mine once referred to Russell T Davis, sort of late period Russell T Davis, but in terms of his TV drama, not Doctor Who, as sort of a bit of a centrist dad, and I think that's maybe fair.
Right, on that note then, we'll be back to do this again in about 4 or 5 weeks. Until we do that, I was JR.
I was John.
And I was Mark.
And we will speak again soon.